One of the chapters is called, it's Jeff Booth's famous saying, you can't fix the system from within the system. And as Bitcoiners, like we know this, right? We know that the fiat system's screwed, that, electing Trump will get us so far. Hopefully we'll get a new prime minister here soon who will help turn the tide up north as well. But you can't, ultimately, politics aren't going to solve the problem. We need a separate system. We can't fix fiat from within fiat. We need Bitcoin to come in to be that alternative system.
I wrote The Bible and Bitcoin for you, Bible-believing Christian, and in it I lay out the biblical basis for what money is, why our current fiat monetary system is ungodly, and how Bitcoin is the best and most viable, biblically compliant replacement for government fiat money. There's even a small group study guide in the back with additional resources to study with your church small group. Get it on Amazon or pay with Bitcoin at thebibleandbitcoin.com for a discount. Welcome to another episode of the Bible and Bitcoin podcast. I'm your host, Alan Armstrong, aka Pastor Coin, and on today's episode, I'm excited to talk with Mr. Dan Sherman, aka, hodling or hodling Jesus, depending on what side of the debate you fall on. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Alan. It's a pleasure. Nice to finally get to chat with you a bit more. We don't live too far apart from each other. I still can't believe we haven't met in person yet, but this will have to do for now.
Yes. So what side of the debate are you on? Are you hodling Jesus or are you hodling Jesus?
I'm definitely on the hodling Jesus camp. To be honest, I haven't really delved into the debate, but that's just what I've always called myself and what I've always heard people calling me. So I'll just go with that by default, I guess.
Just so you know, in my mind, I've always called you hodling Jesus.
Hodling Jesus. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes, because the word hold, H-O, like you say it hold,
right?
You don't say it hauled.
Yeah.
So that's how I reason it, at least.
I mean, it makes sense. You could persuade me otherwise. I don't have a strong preference.
Okay, we've won. All right,
there you go.
Over.
Hodling Jesus, not hodling.
Okay, so you've recently written and published a book called The Gospel According to Bitcoin. And interestingly enough, I was thinking about naming my book The Gospel According to Bitcoin before I named it what I did. I don't remember quite why I didn't name it that, but yeah, that's just a fun little factoid.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. I'm glad somebody took that name and used it. So tell us a little bit about your book. I haven't got it yet. I'm planning on buying it after Christmas, probably with some gift cards, Lord willing.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit what inspired you to write, because that's such a interesting title for a book, right? I mean, if I'm not a Bitcoiner, I'm just a random Christian, and I'm scrolling Amazon and I see The Gospel According to Bitcoin, that's going to pique my interest, either in one way or another. Either one way I'm going to go, wow, this book is probably filled with some heresy, or what could this be? So tell us a little bit about why. Well, I'm curious. Why did you end up naming it The Gospel According to Bitcoin, and what inspired you to author a book like this?
Yeah. Well, let me give a bit of my background. So I work for Power Change Students in Canada, which is a division of Crew. If any of your listeners are in the States, you probably know Crew, one of the largest missions organizations in the world. And I'm actually the son of a Crew staff. So my parents both worked for Crew or Power Change Canada for years. And my dad has a very unique role. So he was what's called the head of the Christian Embassy of Canada. Now he works with another ministry that basically does the same thing called Embassy Connections. But basically he's a minister to the what he calls the up and out of the world. So these are the people who, opposite of the down and out, these are the movers and shakers of the world. So he's basically an unofficial chaplain to members of parliament. He works with upper tier business leaders in Ottawa, and he works with foreign ambassadors. So he's he's out at functions 4 or 5 nights a week. Korea's having their national day, whatever. He's there, he's making these connections. He's a massive networker. But he's basically dedicated his life to reaching leaders, both in Canada and around the world. And So that's kind of like in my genes, and that's kind of in the genes of Power Change students as well. Where our whole goal is to reach university students so that they, when they go on to become people of influence in their jobs and their careers and whatever they're doing, that they'll bring Jesus with them, and they'll cause societal change and share Christ with people. When I saw what Bitcoin was doing, and I kind of fell down the rabbit hole basically 4 years ago. I'm getting up to I'm 7 days away from my first Bitcoin purchase. It was to the 4 year mark, and when I saw what Bitcoin was and what it's doing, I probably, maybe similar to you, I just couldn't help but see so many biblical parallels, and I couldn't help but see just ways in which you could use Bitcoin to explain different elements of the kingdom of God. And then I started thinking, man, if Bitcoin just keeps doing what it's doing, these guys are going to inherit the earth. These are going to be the global wealth holders of the future. And I started looking around me, and I started kind of poking at some of my friends who are in full-time ministry, who are trying to reach future business leaders and stuff like that. I was asking them hey, do you know of anyone who's trying to reach Bitcoiners? And it's just no one. It was just the Christian world is basically asleep on this. And because they don't understand the potential of Bitcoin. And so started thinking to myself, how can we help Bitcoiners understand Jesus? It was around 2021 December that I just made 3 different videos. I have a YouTube channel. It's it's literally 3 videos, but it basically it's almost like a devotional. It explains a principle of Bitcoin, and then it bridges it to something in the gospel. And specifically, I wanted those to come out around Christmas because it was really pointing to Christ and the fact that he became flesh and died for us and rose again. But I started making those videos, and then Jordan, my co-author, he saw those, Jordan Bush, and he's like, Dan, we should work together. And so over time we started to talk, and came to a realization okay, he helped author Thank God for Bitcoin, which was a massively successful book in the space, helping Christians understand Bitcoin. What if we were to do something that helped Bitcoiners understand Christianity? And so that's kind of where this started, and I'm trying to remember where exactly the name came from. And I don't really know, but I know if someone were to write, and we have this in the preface, if someone were to write a book about the gospel according to a jet engine or something like that, what if you have someone who's an aerospace engineer, and they're yeah, I love designing jet engines, and I'm gonna dedicate a book to show the power and the glory of God through the lens of an engineer who designs jet engines. As evangelicals or as Christians, you would look at that guy and be hey, that's awesome. That's really cool. You wouldn't point at them and say that's a heretic. You'd say this is a guy who he's an expert in his field, and he knows his thing. He's trying to bridge that to help other people who maybe have a similar knack for aerospace to know Jesus, right? And so that's basically what we're trying to do with Bitcoin. So we do definitely preface it and say, please don't call us heretics, because it's a book it's crammed with scripture. It's all about Jesus, and it's all about helping build a connection with Bitcoin and bridging that to some kind of gospel connection. Some kind of principle in the kingdom of God that people maybe misunderstand or don't know yet.
So it sounds like you endeavored to write basically a large gospel tract for Bitcoiners. Is that pretty much the goal here?
Yeah. The original, one of the thoughts I had, so in Power Change, or in Crew, we have this little booklet. It's basically like a gospel tract. It's called the Knowing God Personally booklet. It's just a 4-point summary. God loves you. He has a wonderful plan for your life. You are sinful and you need Jesus. Only through Jesus can you actually be saved. And then 4 is you need to actually make a decision. And so turn your life to him. And I was actually thinking how could I design a Bitcoin version of that in really simple form? But I just found that it just took so much more. There's just so much more to explain. And so, it basically become hopefully a lengthened gospel tract. And so, we did 21 meditations. Obviously 21 is the magic number in Bitcoin. The hope is that it's one of those books that's different than maybe some other Bitcoin books that people will read. A lot of Bitcoiners like just cram through. Like I know for me, and I think it was in 2021 when I was first going down the rabbit hole, just cramming through books, like read like a book a month, a Bitcoin book every month. And this one's more meant to be read slowly. So it's like ideally like one meditation a day, and just ponder it and think about it, and like, try praying for the first time, like if that's, or try, picking up your Bible and reading it. And so it's really just like meant to be, it's meant to help, I guess we could say, win people to Christ over like a process of 21 days.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's been one of those things where the Bitcoin community, I've said previously many times before, is what I call I can't speak, the forgotten harvest. Mm-hmm. Because there's this large segment of people out there who have discovered Bitcoin and have had almost like a spiritual, for those listening, I put air quotes over spiritual, experience with Bitcoin. And it seems like they're just ripe for the gospel. And there's nobody, well, there's people, there's me, there's you, there's a couple others, but relatively speaking, to the size of the harvest, that's like a, 2,000 square foot field, and you send like 5 guys out, go harvest this field. We can't do it. We need a lot more people to help harvest this. Why do you think this segment that is so ripe has been missed?
Well, yeah, I think it comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of Bitcoin. And then I think you could just throw in all the typical FUD. Like before we started this call or started recording, we were talking about like trying to orange pill churches and trying to orange pill, Christian nonprofits that we're part of. And it's just crickets. Like it's that no one cares. And I remember trying to reach out to to my board. I'd recently come off being ended my term as an elder at my church. And then like a year later, I tried to pitch to them like, hey, can I come in and do like an explanation of Bitcoin and why we might want to adopt it as a church? And they just ignored, like they responded to me like 3 months later and said, because I poked them again and I was like, did you get my message? They're like, oh, we thought that was spam. Like, no, we're not interested in that right now. And so I think it's really just the typical, typical FUD. Like people think, as I've shared this within my nonprofit with Power Change, like people have responded and said like, oh, like, like here's an article by the UN on why Bitcoin is just ridiculous and why it's like destroying the earth. And I'm like, okay, well, you haven't used your brain yet. You haven't really thought about it, because like I could come back to you with like 5 other articles that tell you why it's great for the environment and why it's not just being used by criminals. And like I could give you examples. And people.
Well, you could also say, what's worse for the environment?
Fiat.
Dollar.
Yeah, funding all those aircraft carriers. Yeah, polluting the environment. Yeah, totally. So I think it's just the typical FUD. People just have no idea where this is going. I did a presentation about a month ago. We had this little group that was meeting at my local university here called Redemptive Entrepreneurship. And it's basically a group of, I don't know, 20, 30 people that get together every week. And we bring in a local entrepreneur to share about something that they're doing, like how they started a business. And it's kind of a mix of Christians and non-Christians, but it's exploring entrepreneurship through a Christian lens. And my buddy recently gave me a platform to share about my book. And I shared about it in this way. Like I took the epochs of Bitcoin, like back in the first epoch, 2008 to 2012, it ranged anywhere from $0 to $32 in the US pricing. The next epoch, it ranged from $32 to like $1,000 or something. The next price point, it was like, and it keeps just incrementally getting these larger and larger chunks, like higher lows and much higher highs. And I basically asked him the question, what if this doesn't stop? Like that's the theory of this book. This book is we're taking a flyer on what if Bitcoin doesn't stop, and these people who have been buying, from the early days, in the hundreds of dollars, or maybe even buying now. And if Bitcoin just, and we're looking at like 10, 20 years down the road, like these people are going to own the world. They're going to have so much money and power. And as you know, like you've explained this and know this, like money is just it's a proxy of our energy and labor and time that we have stored up that we're able to then use almost as an IOU to take other people's time and energy and to use purchase their goods and purchase their services. And so having money is power. And if you're gonna reach anyone, like why not try reaching some of these people who are going to have just a ton of wealth and unleash it for generosity and for the good of people all over the world and the glory of God. And so that's the heart behind the book. There's a passage that we start off with the first chapter. What is it? It's in 1 Peter. I should know this, but it basically asks the question. Peter's talking about the end of the world. He's talking about this idea. See if I can find it. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some of you understand. Instead, he's patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but wanting everyone to come to repentance. Then he says, like the day of the Lord. So this is like end times talking about. He says, the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed with fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. It's interesting. So he's talking about the end of the world, and he doesn't then get into like food prepping. He doesn't get into buy your ammo, make sure you secure your land. His next question is, he says this, since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? So he questions in light of knowing what's going to come. He asks them so who should you be? What's your character? And this is the way we want to start this book towards Bitcoin is this fiat system's going down. That Bitcoin is if it holds true, if it maintains its 21 unit scarcity, that it's going to be something incredibly important. The question is who ought you to be, knowing that you are going to be inheriting the world in a sense, and so it's really a question of getting Bitcoiners to assess their values, assess what are they worshiping, assess what's their character fundamentally, and put forward Jesus as the model of this is if you're going to strive to be anyone, strive to be like Jesus. He's the best person who's ever lived and ever will live. And so that's kind of the heart behind it.
Yeah, as you say that, a very profound question pops into mind, and it's, what does the world look now? And this is where we can have some fun. So have some fun with this one. What does the world look like when this wealth transfer is complete, and all these Bitcoiners who are now Christians because of your book,
and your book
have
too,
the wealth? So what does that look like when they all have the wealth and they're all Christians now and they're all worshiping Jesus, and finally all the rich people follow Christ? What does the world look like?
Yeah, I mean it's I'll be honest, it's hard to imagine. There's just a lot of darkness. We both live in Canada, and so it's Canada can be pretty dark. And we think of the homelessness epidemic that's happening, the fentanyl crisis, there's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of people who are working so hard just to get by. What would it look like if you had this class of people who were utterly generous and own a ton of Bitcoin? What kind of things could they start that would alleviate just massive amounts of suffering? Oh boy, I don't know. I wonder, because I've had conversations about this. A friend who knows a guy who traveled to East Hastings in Vancouver. And if you don't know, East Hastings is the epicenter of homelessness and drug abuse probably in Canada. It's just almost like lawlessness on the streets. I've driven through it one time. It's just it's like zombies walking the streets. What would that look like if these people had hope and had services that were helping them, if they were actually taught about Bitcoin and hey, I don't have to live hand to mouth, but I can actually myself start storing for the future. I don't know. I put the question to
Like,
you too. Like, what do you think would change?
yeah, when I think of that, I think in terms of the institutions that have been hijacked by the state would
Right.
be now in the hands of the church again,
Mm,
right? Healthcare, education, justice, the courts, you name it. All
mm,
these institutions that are at record lows for public trust would now be in the hands of the Christians, of the church, where it kind of started, right? I mean, healthcare was not a pagan idea.
no.
It wasn't the pagans who thought, let's build hospitals for the sick.
No.
Let's, let's value education and books and libraries and, all the major Ivy League universities were seminaries to begin with.
Hmm.
So, what I would see is just, yeah, a golden age, or I guess you would call it the Bitcoin age of a revival of all these things. I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
incredible breakthroughs in medicine, incredible education, justice would come back. A fair, just court system and so forth. So I don't. Obviously, the world's not going to be perfect. I don't think Bitcoin is like the silver bullet that ends sin. But I can definitely see things improving dramatically, education being a
Mm-hmm.
lot better, which would then lead to more ethical innovation,
Hmm.
which would lead to humans living better lives, living longer lives, living more healthy lives.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what I see. Just my hope and prayer is that all these things shift back to the church
Mm.
and we can have ethical, nice things again, right? Science, you name it. So that's kind of how I see
Yeah,
it.
that's interesting. I think one of the things that you kind of skirted on there was just this idea that like it's not just about being very wealthy, but like Bitcoin itself is like not the but a like beacon of truth. Like all it does is all Bitcoin does is speak truth. Like
Yeah.
it shows us all the blocks. It's full transparency. It's just like 100% truth basically for what it's saying, and I think there's some knock-on effects there. And like I mean, you talked about how like people have had like quote unquote spiritual experiences when they've come to Bitcoin. I know of this one girl. She I don't know if you follow her on Twitter. I think her on X she's Death in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
She's
yeah, I know her. Yeah,
yeah, someone who I think she helps people in palliative care.
yeah,
But she was saying she became a Christian because she discovered Bitcoin,
yeah.
and it
Didn't she
was
recently post like her Bible she bought or something? Her first Bible, I
yeah,
think that was her. Yeah.
yeah. I remember that's how I got talking to her a bit, and I asked her like, how did it start? And she says when she learned what Bitcoin was, she couldn't help but thank God for it, even though she didn't know God existed. And so she just started praising God for Bitcoin. She's like, she was just so grateful that
Wow.
that she found this thing, and she says it started a conversation that hasn't stopped. And so she's just been like basically like basically moment by moment praying all the time, and start a relationship with Jesus because of Bitcoin, which is just hilarious. But there's I think all these knock on effects where when truth and when the dominant store of value is just fundamentally true, it
Mm.
affects all those other institutions, like you're saying, that they'll be hopefully more ethical, and there'll be better standards, and the people inside will be filled with integrity and make better decisions.
Yeah. It's hard not to think in terms of in utopic terms, if that's a word.
Yeah.
Because it's when you see the potential and you see the truth and the honesty in the system, and you know what's remarkable to me is that Bitcoin, when you really boil it down to its core essence, what it is, it's not that extraordinary, right? It's just
Yeah.
a system that honestly keeps tallies.
Yeah. It's just
That's all
just
it
a
is.
big
It's just
ledger.
like
Yeah.
it's like 21 million units or 2.1 quadrillion, whatever, however you want to, units of numbers, and all it's just a self-regulating, honest tally of where these units are going,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it doesn't sound extraordinary. It doesn't sound very, because you might think like, well, there's got to be other ways of doing this, but then you go down a rabbit hole and you realize there aren't. There
Right.
aren't. Like,
Right.
humans will be dishonest. If we can manipulate it, we will. And here comes this Bitcoin thing, which does the most mundane, boring thing you could think: keep track of numbers.
Hmm.
And it does it honestly and perfectly, so much so that we could use it to build the economy on. And when you realize it's like it's not that extraordinary, but at the same time it is,
Hmm.
because of how dishonest we are as human beings.
Hmm.
And I think that's where people really have that revelation of like, okay, wow, I've finally, for those who didn't grow up as Christians, I've finally encountered something that is mercilessly true, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't care. It's going to be true no matter what.
Yeah.
Why? So the question I want to pose to you: why do you think people have these religious experiences with Bitcoin? Because it's not something, like I said, it's not something that's like extraordinary. It's just keeping track of numbers. Why such a spiritual and emotional sort of response to something like that? Keeping track of numbers shouldn't lead
Right.
someone to Christ, should it? Like,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense of that.
I mean, God can use anything.
Sure,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's I think big part of it is people are seeing a contrast, right? They're seeing a very broken when you can't understand Bitcoin without understanding just how broken our current system is. And the two kind of come together. You start to like, oh, get an inkling on Bitcoin, and then like, oh, like it does it, like fiat world works this way, and like it just ratchets up, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
oh, and then until you kind of come to the point where like, man, like the fiat system is just so screwy, and so immoral, and it's just, yeah, it's based in so many lies. Like why would you just come to the point where it's like, why would I save in something that someone else can just create for free? Like I had to work for that.
Yeah.
It's just that it's so it's a paradigm shift that people come through, and they realize that Bitcoin's something that can that's real and actually exists, and they can hold hold their store value in it to change their lives in the future. I think just that contrast that they're seeing makes people wonder, what else is there? Like, what else did I utterly miss? Like, I'm 40, like, and I went 36 years just adopting the fiat system as it was presented to me. We just accept reality as it's presented to us. And when I discovered Bitcoin, I started to think like, man, like this is just nuts. And I wonder if there's other people out there who maybe had some spiritual interest, or maybe they went to church as a kid, maybe they didn't and they were mildly curious, but they see Bitcoin and they wonder, wow, like there's so much happening behind the scenes that I had no idea. What if this is happening in other areas of my life too? And I mean, Christianity like is that on a massive scale, right? Like there's this whole spiritual world that's happening behind the scenes. There's this fight for the human soul between good and evil, between God and Satan, that's happening right now. And like most people are completely oblivious to it. And so I don't actually know. I don't know if you're interested in something like this, but I would love to hear like just stories of people who came to Christ as a result of Bitcoin, and just have like testimony night, just roll them
You know
through.
what? I'm
Like
going to message Death and Bitcoin because I want to have her on to give her testimony. And
that'd be
so
amazing.
you've given me that idea now. I think I'm going to maybe start a series of, coming to Christ through Bitcoin.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I'd
That'd
be
be
so
cool because then
interested
you
in
could
that.
just show that to like your pastors and be like, get with the program. There's lots of people out here who are coming to Christ, who need Christ, who are ripe. Like, look, here's the
Yeah,
evidence.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's another guy is the rules are broken up in Ottawa.
Hmm.
I would, yeah, reach out to him too. He's had an experience like this as well. Started going to church for the first time as a result of Bitcoin. Yeah, I know. I put the question back on you. Like, why do you think people are having this like come to Jesus moment as a result of a come to Bitcoin moment?
When I started researching Bitcoin, I was already a Christian. I already had a
Yeah.
worldview founded on the existence of absolute truth, objective morality, all this
Hmm.
stuff. I already
Yeah.
believed all that. I already understood all that. I don't know where you stand with apologetics, but like I'm a heavy presuppositional apologetics type of guy. It's like you start with God and you build everything on God. Like you
Yep.
can't proving God's existence is a act of futility because you can't prove his existence without presupposing he exists right in the beginning.
Yep. Yep.
So I already had this robust objective worldview. God is, everything else is built on top of that presupposition. So when I started researching Bitcoin and realizing what it wasn't like my light bulb moment for Bitcoin. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is an extraordinary system. It was sort of opposite for most people, where I realized, oh my goodness, fiat is so messed up, more messed up than I initially thought. Because I knew it was messed up, but I figured it can't be that bad, right? I mean, look
Right.
at, relatively speaking, we live in a pretty good place. So I figured if it's done some good, it can't be that bad. Bitcoin forced me to go down the dark rabbit hole of fiat. And then when I contrasted the two, which is probably why my book is written this way, when I contrasted the two, I realized, wow, Bitcoin is special, not because it does something extraordinary, keeping track of numbers, but because of how bad this is, right? And so that's when I realized, okay, I need to be a Bitcoiner based on the fact that it's the more moral system. Because I'm a Christian, I'm a Bitcoiner. It's just the way I see it. Now, why do people have the opposite experience? I think it's because they don't have an objective worldview. They don't have a worldview where they know that there are absolute truths. Most people are relativistic. Most people are like, well, my truth and your truth, and they live this kind of way. I agree to disagree. Your Jesus, my Jesus, this kind of stuff. So when they come face to face with Bitcoin, which is this objective, this truth machine, they've never encountered something like this before in their life. And it blows them away. Oh my gosh, right? Like you said, if this is objectively true, then what else is objectively true?
Right.
And that rabbit hole inevitably leads to Christ, because he is the truth. As he said, I am the truth. So that's why I think people have religious experiences. It's not that it's not that Bitcoin's a religious thing. It's just that they're so disconnected from religion, from truth, that this truth thing, it blows them away, because it's the first time really they've experienced and seen something like this that they can't refute, right? You can't refute Bitcoin. You can't refute it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Like, it's like Bitcoin is like they're dipping the toe in the water to like a base reality that has been there the whole time, whose foundation is just Jesus. Like, Jesus is the most based real thing, air quotes, in the universe. And when you dip your toe into what objective truth looks like, you're gonna have a hunger for more. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you should definitely start interviewing some of these people.
Yeah.
That'd be so fascinating to hear.
I'm really I would love to also do some, not debates. I don't want to debate people. Excuse me, but I'd like to talk to some atheist Bitcoiners too, because they have a perspective. I've seen it on Twitter where they're like, "How can you be a religious Bitcoiner?" Like, they don't understand. Where I'm on the other side going, I don't understand how you can come to Bitcoin
Right.
and not become religious.
Right.
So there's these two opposite ends, and they're both thinking the other side is irrational. I want to bring them together and see what happens.
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Because how can you be an atheist when you collide with this objective truth all day?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear those too.
Yeah. So with this book being an evangelistic type of book, how would you recommend people use it? Because I'm already thinking, okay, I'm going to buy a bunch of copies because I have a Bitcoin meetup locally. So I'm going to buy a bunch of copies and hand them to my not Christian Bitcoin friends, because I have a good number of Bitcoin friends now who aren't Christian, but who aren't against Christianity either. So is this a book that would be appropriate to do that with? And if so, how would you recommend it be used in that way?
Yeah, I think I think you could. The way one of the phrases I'd love to market it with is just like it's for the Bitcoiner in your life. And so, if you're a Christian and you want your Bitcoiner friend to know Jesus, like my hope is that this would be a great resource for them. I think there's like it's there's some parts that get pretty heavy. Like we have a whole chapter on hell, which is something not even like a lot of churches are uncomfortable talking about. But it basically builds off this notion of a CBDC. And was it Matt Cratter's? I don't know if you watch Matt Cratter, but he talks about this idea of 1,000-year prison, where CBDCs, along with this, some kind of system like they have in going on in China, what's called the social credit system, like that can lock you into a prison where everything you do is evaluated and scored, and you can't speak out against the government. You have to, you can only buy meat on weekends or whatever it is. Like your quota for gas is up, all that stuff. It gets to a weird dark place, and talking about like that there's a greater danger awaiting us that you need to address in the fact that, like, do you know which path you're on? Like that there's going to be a day when Jesus separates the sheep from the goats. And are you a sheep or are you a goat? Like, what are you going to be? Are you dependent on the shepherd, or are you a lone ranger and trying to do things completely your own way? And so it definitely has some parts that get pretty heavy, but everything builds off of a principle in Bitcoin. So if someone loves Bitcoin and knows Bitcoin, then the hope is that they'll be open and receptive to at least hearing, like, this is the Christian kind of a Christian explanation based on what you know about Bitcoin. So, and then it gets into a lot of like kind of what we've been talking about objective reality. There's this idea of monetary anthropology, which is one of the chapters written by Jordan, which it assesses, like, what does the type of money tell us about who we are as people? There's another chapter called the freedom. Was it? It gets into, like, the whole the Proverbs verse where it says, like, don't use dishonest scales. Honest weights and measures are dishonest scales and weights and measures are an abomination to the Lord. I think is what it says in the reverse, right? Where it talks about that, but then it builds this bridge to say, like, sure, like, yeah, we need to be honest and truthful in the way we interact in our finances and how we do trade, and the money needs to be clean. But there's this other side to it as well, where in a sense we've all tipped the scales. Like, we've all tipped the scales in our favor so that we take advantage of other people, so that we've all sinned. We've all sinned to fall short of the glory of God, and there's only we need to rely on another principle. So there's the principle of sowing and reaping. Like, you're going to reap what you sow. You're going to have a better society if you have honest weights, if you have honest measures. But then you could take it one step further, in that we've all screwed that up. And what's the solution? There's a higher principle, which is the law of grace, where Jesus actually says, I know you've done this wrong. I'm just gonna forgive you. You just have to trust me. And then there's this restoration from within. And so it's definitely meant to be like compelling and try to help people know Jesus, but yeah, build off of some kind of Christian principle.
Yeah. I have a bunch of faces in mind now of who I'm going to give this book to. So I look forward to doing that. Is there anything final you want to say regarding anything, really? Shoot from the hip. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll end on this note. One of the chapters is called, it's Jeff Booth's famous saying, "You can't fix the system from within the system." And as Bitcoiners, like, we know this, right? We know that the fiat system's screwed, that, electing Trump will get us so far. Hopefully we'll get a new prime minister here soon who will help turn the tide up north as well. But you can't ultimately, like, politics aren't going to solve the problem. We need a separate system. We can't fix fiat from within fiat. We need Bitcoin to come in to be that alternative system, so we're not debt based, we're equity based, and where fair laws are set, where rules not rulers, all of that. And so Bitcoiners believe this, and then at the same time, Bitcoiners are relentless when it comes to things like self-improvement, when it comes to dieting, eating properly, eliminating seed oils, getting exercise, lifting weights, whatever it is. They're trying to improve themselves. They're trying to fix themselves. And so this one chapter, and I think really what I would want to leave any Bitcoiners in the audience here with is like, you can't fix yourself. You need something, like, this about Bitcoin. Why don't you accept this for the rest of your life? Like, you need someone from the outside to come in and change your heart. Like, you can't, the human heart is deceitful above all else. Like, you don't even know sometimes when you think you're doing the right thing and you're actually royally screwing the pooch. Like, you're doing something terrible. And so you need someone from outside the system to be that not just like that, like, in a sense, a plumb line of like to assess where you're at, but also to actually enter into you by the Holy Spirit and change you from the inside out. And so that would be like the message is like, yeah, trust in Jesus is like the overall bent of what this is going at. Like, you can't fix yourself, you can't fix the system. So why would you rely on yourself and not on Jesus to fix you and help you change your character and restore your life?
Yeah, it's interesting that Bitcoiners understand that Bitcoin is the perfect 21 million units measuring stick, right? You can use this measuring stick to value all economic activity.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your own life, morals, ethics, the way to live, the truth outside of Bitcoin, you don't want to accept a unmoving standard, right?
Right.
We want to argue about that. So it is really interesting, the sort of, and there's that thing about you said rules not rulers. Well, that's only that's only a thing because of human beings, right? I mean,
yeah.
We don't want human rulers.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Rules not rulers, sure, but when it comes to God, and He's the ruler, right? It's not just like God is a set of rules, right? He's an actual person with a will, and He's the actual ruler. So, and then don't trust, verify, all these things that get misconstrued and misinterpreted. Well, trust Jesus. No, bro, I'm not going to trust. I'm going to verify.
Right.
Well, the thing is, once you verify, you're going to trust.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have no choice. Like Thomas, right? Put your hands into my, side and see that I'm real. And so he verified. And then what happened after he verified? Well, he trusted, because the verification led him to trust. It was the only option left after he verified. So, anyways, we could talk all day. Where can people find you? And more importantly, do you have a copy of the book near you? Can you show it?
I don't have it right now, actually. Yeah, it's I've got an order coming that's not going to arrive till mid January, unfortunately. Yeah, Jordan got the proof sent to his house just because they're publishing out of the States, and it made more sense to get it down there. But so I don't have a physical copy of it yet. I apologize. But yeah, you can find it on Amazon, or you can order it from tgfb.com. I think that's what it is. And then you can find me. I'm decently active on X at what do you call it? Hodling J.
Hodling J.
Hodling Jesus. Yeah, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Dan. It was a great conversation. I hope many are blessed. Go out and get the book. Get a couple copies, actually, so you can give it to your unbelieving Bitcoin friends. And until next time, grace and peace.
Thanks, Alan.
Your family, your nation, and your world needs strong men. The devil wants men weak, emasculated, and addicted to porn. This is why I designed the Slaying the Beast course to help men take back the dominion porn stole from them. This course will help you discover your identity as God's image, how porn leverages and twists that against you, and how with God's help you can turn the tables on the beast and live free. There's also access to a Discord server where you can have fellowship with others in the fight. You do not have to wait any longer to conquer this beast once and for all. Go to lifegiverchurch.net to get started today.